happy to have the opportunity to study through the life of Jesus. Couldn't help but think about that song, "Worthy art thou, worthy of Christ." Christ is worthy of all of our love and our adoration. Just a quick side note. One of the blessings Lee and I had earlier on, when people come to meetings, usually stay in our house. Paul Williams and his wife, Helen, had come from South Africa, and he was making a tour of the country, and we were going to support him when we lived in Hobart, Indiana. Anyway, Brother Williams devoted the larger part. Did any of you ever know him, Paul Williams? He lived over in South Africa. I don't know how many years, but I know at least 30. And he was able to translate tracts into some of the native languages. But he made a comment. I'll just get to the point that he said, Brother Tedley's songs, "Worthy Art Thou," and there's so many that he wrote, were the easiest to translate in some of those native tongues because of the repetition of the rhythm. And you'll just notice if you look at his songs, it's just an easy. It's not a difficult. The music is not difficult. And anyway, Brother Tedley was from afar. He's kind of been a hero of mine. All right, our readings, our private readings, have taken us from Matthew 15 to 23 tonight. So if you would, just turn in your New Testaments to Matthew, and we'll just go pretty rapidly through all this. Matthew is written to emphasize what about Jesus? His what?
Kingship.
His kingship. And he's the Messiah of Old Testament expectation. And as we really in Galilee, in these chapters, in Matthew 14 and 15, we have different opinions of Jesus. We noticed that Sunday morning. In chapter 15, the Pharisees think that Jesus just breaks the what? The traditions of the elders. And so he dealt with that. He withdrew into Sidon, and then he, toward the end of the chapter, he feeds how many thousand? 4,000. He has already fed the 5,000. He feeds the 4,000 here. I used to, in teaching just the book of Matthew, I would try to emphasize the kingdom, and I would talk about different opinions of the king. And then in 16, I would try to get young people to memorize the announcement of the establishment of the kingdom. And he said, upon this rock I will build my church. The gates of Hades shall not prevail against it. He's in Caesarea Philippi. And then when he first announces in verse 21 that he's going to have to go to Jerusalem and do what? Die. And well, I just told you, who says, no. Peter. And Jesus rebukes him. And then in 17, there's a tremendous amount of really encouragement that's given to Peter, James, and John, because what happens to Jesus? He's transfigured. And the voice from heaven says, "This is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased. Hear ye him." And so we have that. We have when he comes down, he heals a man's son who had several issues. And then eventually in chapter 17, we find that somebody asked, "Does your master pay the half shekel, the temple tithes?" And Peter went ahead and said, "Oh yeah, he does that." And so when Peter and Jesus get together, Jesus quizzes him on that. You know, kings of the earth, their sons, who do they pay, or the strangers? And he said, strangers. And he said, well, that's right. And I don't really, did Jesus really have to pay it? I mean, after all, the temple was designed for whose honor? His own honor. But in order to keep anyone from stumbling, he told Peter, go throw your hook in the Sea of Galilee, and what? You get a fish, and in its mouth will be a coin, and you take that and pay for you and for me. In chapter 18, you could probably summarize this, offenders and offenses in the kingdom. The first part, he says, just don't do anything that would cause a person to what? To stumble. Well, what about when somebody sins against you? Then you go to him by yourself. If you won't hear them or him, take one or two. And then won't hear two or three, tell it to the church. Won't give the church. Let him be a heathen or a publican to you. And then he ends the idea there in the latter part of 18 by showing that if a person, Peter asks the question, Lord, how many times shall we do what? Forgive a person. And he says 7, right? 70 times 7, unlimited. And then he gives the parable that follows. In chapter 19, he goes across into what's called Perea, and then he has people trying him, and he talks about what subject, 3 through 12. What is it? Divorce and remarriage, right. And he deals with that and basically says, haven't you read what Moses wrote in Genesis? That he who made them in the beginning made them male and female, said, for this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, cleave to his wife, and the two shall be one flesh. While God has joined together, what? Yeah. And so that's their answer. And then he said, well, what about Moses? Wasn't the law? And he dealt with that. Then a little bit later, we have the interview with the rich young ruler. He went away sorrowfully because he had what? Much riches. Which reminded Peter, well, we had riches, but we left them in order to follow you. So what are we going to have? And so the Lord says, well, in the regeneration, when the Son of Man sits on the throne of his kingdom, you also shall sit on 12 thrones, doing what? Judging the 12 tribes of Israel. And so you'll have this position in the church through your words. In chapter 20, the parable of the laborers in the vineyard. Right. And then more miracles. They have a conversation with James and John. Their mother is there, and they want James and John to kind of be kingpins in the kingdom once it's established. And the Lord told them, you don't know really what you're asking. And then in we're going through 23. 21, we actually have come to the last week. And we have Jesus doing what in 21? Going into Jerusalem, triumphal entry. And we have the cursing of the fig tree. We have him accosted by the Jews. And by what authority do you do these things? That is the turning over the money changers' tables. And he deals with that. And then the parable of the wicked husbandman down toward the end of 21. In 22, what parable do we have? Parable of the what? The marriage feast, yes. And then we have these debates that are going on. This is likely a Tuesday of the last week of the Lord's life by chapter 22. The Sadducees ask him, and of course the Sadducees didn't believe in what to start with? The resurrection. And they said, well, what about this woman's married to a man and he dies and his brother takes her to wife. In the resurrection, whose will she be? And so he answers that. And then Pharisees come and say, which is the greatest commandment in the law? That's 34 through 40. And he answers that adeptly by saying, love the Lord your God with all your heart and your neighbor as yourself. And then he asked them a question. What think you of the Christ? Whose son is he? And they said, well, the son of David. And they were right about that. Well, then how did David in the Spirit call him Lord if he is the son? And then he quotes from Psalm 110, which indicated that the Messiah would actually be a descendant of David, but actually would be David's Lord in that he is deity. And so he would be human as well as divine. And so as a result of that, did they ask him any more questions there for a while? No, that stumped them. And then in chapter 23, the last chapter we'll cover, in 23 there are a series of a little three-letter word on a bunch of people. Woes. And we have those in Luke 11, which is where we've been. But woes on these Pharisees and some specifics that they were guilty of committing. And then we come really to chapter 24, which would be the when he's asked about the destruction of Jerusalem. Okay, comment, question on any of that? All right, let's go to Luke 11, guys. And we are in our workbooks. We're on, let's see, did we get down to, did we answer our questions on the top of 24? We didn't answer. We just walked through. Okay. All right. In chapter 11, let's glance on our slides real quickly. We've got in the life of Jesus, the years of preparation, about 30, his beginning ministry, which always just think the beginning ministry began with what event? His what? His baptism. And then followed by his temptation and so on. And then those early chapters of John, when he's down around Jerusalem. Great Galilean ministry for a better part of 2 years. Then he retires from the crowds because they're following him for the wrong reasons. And then he sets his face toward Jerusalem, Luke 9, about verse 51. And so we have the closing ministry that we've been talking about, primarily in John as well as Luke. And we pointed out that Luke records some of his work in Judea as well as Perea, whereas John, just think JJ, John in Jerusalem. John records more of his work in the city of Jerusalem. And here's where we've been in our outline. All right, one of the disciples says to the Lord, Lord, teach us to pray even as John taught his disciples, which leads to the model prayer, and then the parable of the persistent or the importune friend, and to encourage prayer. And then the miracle, the double miracle, he cast out demons. And what was the other problem the fellow had there in Luke 11 that they said, oh, the multitude said, they marveled.
There was one to be healed, one blind.
That's right, yeah. Notice in verse, where is it? Well, if I got out of Mark, it would help me. What verse is it? Luke 11, verse 14. Yeah, a demon possessed as well as mute, or some of the translations say dumb, couldn't speak. And so you had different reactions. And then Jesus gave the answers to those that either I'm doing it by the power of God, and the kingdom of God has come upon you. The truth and the veracity of everything I'm saying, you can't deny. Either that's the case, or your disciples who you claim are casting out demons, they're doing it by the same power of Beelzebub that you claim I am, if that's the case. Then he gave us the parable of the unclean spirit, and showing that after Jesus has been here, he's cast out these demons, he's doing good work, but he's going to go away. He would die, and then he would be raised and then ascend into heaven. If you don't fill up this vacuum with good stuff, what's going to happen? It's going to be worse than it was before he came. And so the parable of the unclean spirit. Then some woman comes up and said, oh, your mother must be highly blessed. And he basically says, well, she's a good woman, but really blessed are all those who hear the word of God and keep it, in verses 27 and 28. And then, well, we'd see a sign from you. It said, no sign will be given except the sign of Jonah, the prophet. And so we talked about that in length on Sunday morning. So here's where we are. The light of the body and the stressing, the warning against spiritual blindness. Let's read that, and then we'll come back and do our questions. Chapter 11, verses 33 through 36. Brother Richard, if you would read that for us. 11, 33 through 36.
No man, when he hath lighted a candle, putteth it in a secret place, neither under a bushel, but on a candlestick, that they which come in may see the light. The light of the body is the eye. Therefore, when thine eye is single, thy whole body also is full of light. But when thine eye is evil, thy body also is full of darkness. Take heed, therefore, that the light which is in thee be not darkness. If the whole body therefore be full of light, having no part dark, the whole shall be full of light, as when the bright shining of a candle doth give thee light.
Okay, now similar language we've already studied in the Sermon on the Mount. And it actually deals, you're the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hid, neither do men light a lamp and put it under a bushel, but on a stand so that it gives light to all that are in it. Even so let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works glorify your Father who is in heaven. That emphasizes our own what toward others? Influence. How we need to be careful that we provide really salt or preserving, light, information, help, all of those things to people in the world and around us. I think the emphasis here in Luke 11, though, is the light that is not necessarily ours shining toward others, but the light is actually penetrating into our own hearts. I think that's the point here. No man, when he has lighted a lamp or lit a lamp, puts it in a cellar or in a bushel on a stand, that they which enter in may see the light. Here it's as if Jesus is saying, I'm giving you light. I'm giving you a manifestation of who God is. I'm telling you everything you need to know. And there are a couple things you can do with it. You can just shove it under and don't do anything with it, like the Pharisees were trying to do. Or you can raise it up and say, oh, this is what I need. The lamp of the body is thine eye. And when thine eye is single or is focused, and you're seeing, hey, he is what he claims to be, then your whole body shall be full of light. But when it's evil, that is, you're trying to squelch it and turn it away, your whole body is full of darkness. That is, you're in the dark. So he says, look therefore whether the light that is in thee, I think that's the key of that paragraph. You make sure that the light that is in thee be not darkness. You make sure that you are focused on in the right way. Me, Jesus says, you see the light through me, and it penetrates into your heart, and you do something about it. And so if your whole body be full of light, having no part dark, that is the radiance of my character, my teaching, it's radiating into your thinking, your heart. Then if it's full of light, having no dark, it shall be wholly full of light. That is, you'll see the purpose of all this, as when the lamp with its bright shining doth give thee light. I think that's really just talking through it. I think that's the difference between this passage in Luke 11 and the passage in Matthew 5 that has very similar language, but the emphasis is on our helping others, and versus just we got to help ourselves first. Yes, Josh.
So in 34, is this an example? I remember us talking about the Bible speaks literally and figuratively. So in this one in 34, it's both in a sense.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, the lamp of the body is the eye. That's really some of that's in Matthew 6 also. The lamp of the body is the eye. In Matthew 6 says, if your eye be single, your whole body will be full of light. That is the idea that the idea of single vision is focused vision versus amblyopia, where one eye is looking over here, another eye is looking over there, and it's not focused, and you're looking straight into it. So he says, in Matthew 6, the point is you're not laying up for yourselves treasures on earth and treasures in heaven at the same time. This passage, it looks like you're looking straight. If your eye be single and you're looking at Jesus for who he is, and you're trying to see, hey, he is who he claims to be, and I want to know more about him and let that penetrate into me. I think that's the idea here.
Just so I have you heard you correctly, because I'm having trouble. Your whole body is also full of light. Is that speaking literally or figuratively?
No, I think that's talking about your whole being. Yeah, your whole being. It would have the light of the gospel. In that sense, just as he says in here, as well as Matthew 6, that our eyes are so significant. They give the mind or our brain the information where, we can focus on this or that. We can go here or there. And so the light of the body, what helps our body to know what to do, where to go, is the eye. And if thy eye be focused, single, if the eye be single, your whole body will be full of light. If it's single-purposed and single-minded, it helps the whole being. I think that's, and a lot of it's figurative, I think, Josh, but I think that's the idea that's behind it.
Could it be too, our eyes, or what we see be it, this may be a stretch, you can correct me, but it's what we read, whatever we read, it's
Yeah.
what we read with, it's what we view, movies, TV, the things that we choose to look at in the world or not look at in the world, that goes through our literal eye, doing what you said.
Yeah.
It's talking to our brain, we're putting it into our heart and mind through our eyes. So, we gotta be very careful with our eyes
Yeah.
because it affects our thinking, our heart.
Every bit of it.
Yes, it does. And
Yeah.
so, but if your eye, if you're filling that eye full of light and good, I know
Good
it
things.
literally means light too, like you said, so if
Yeah.
you have a single focus,
Yeah,
then it will help you to not use your eye for darkness.
exactly. Look on things that are dark. If you want to look at the Waldron's, page 95, and I know, I don't know if all of you have the book before you, their page 95, they've got in the left page, right column, there's a little text box up here, and they have a note on that. The point Jesus made about the eye being the lamp of the body is that we must be careful about the things we see, which is exactly what you were saying, Patty, and the way we perceive the things we see. If our attitude is critical, cynical, unbelieving, or blindly stubborn outlook, then every fact we encounter will be shaded by our bad attitude. The people were all hearing Jesus and seeing his miracles. Some were believing in him, others were not. The difference was not because they saw different evidence. It was rather how they treated that evidence because of their own pre-existing attitudes. I thought that was extremely well put, which is really what you were saying, I think, Patty. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were talking about how the fellow that works with them, it's just everything's always bad. Everything's down, and never see any, there's no optimism, And in this, they kind of applied that cynical shade to Jesus. Look through cynical eyeglasses, as it were, toward Jesus. He can't be that. He just can't. He can't be the Son of God. He's not bringing to us what kind of a kingdom we're looking for. And just that down, down, down. And I think that's one of the things Jesus is saying here. Does that, David, anything look like you want to say something? Yes, sir, Brother Jim.
Jeremiah 6:10, and then that's,
Yes.
Jesus uses that in Matthew 13. You see with your eyes and understand with your heart, and when your heart is
Hard.
wax gross,
Yes.
you don't understand,
Yes.
and sometimes you're looking at the truth,
And
and
it
it doesn't penetrate your heart.
Yes.
And, if you're not touched by the words of God, if you don't feel some guilt about your sins,
Yes.
then you can read what the book says all day long and be unaffected by it.
No effect whatsoever. I may have told you, my mom, after my dad died, maybe a year or so after, the doctor said, "You've got diabetes." And she just wouldn't believe it. And I think Mom, I'm not certain she ever believed it till she died. And I told her, I said, "Mom, your A1C is high. Your all these, here are the markers." And it was almost what people say, they live in that Great River denial. And if you don't want to, I made the point before, Jesus said, "Go teach all nations," didn't he? Baptizing those you teach. And Paul said in Ephesians 3 that part of his work was of an apostle, as an apostle, was to make all men see what is the dispensation of the fellowship of the mystery which was hid in God who created all things. That's about verse 10, or 8, I think it is. To make all men see. You can't make all men do, but if you can just show it, this is the evidence. And then it's up to them to do with the evidence what they need to do. That's exactly what Jesus was doing. He was giving them all of the evidence through his miracles, his ability to overpower nature, to make wine out of water, to calm the storm, to heal the sick, raise the dead, and then speak in ways that man had never heard. The multitudes were astounded, for he spoke as one having authority and not as the scribes. No man ever spake like this. They had all that evidence, and they were still so closed-minded that that's not what we're looking for. And so I made the point. There's a Greek word pistis, and that it's usually translated belief or faith. And we have two English words that give a little bit of different meaning to that. You can be an unbeliever, for instance. Some translations translate the same. You can be an unbeliever because you just don't know. You just haven't heard the evidence. Disbelief is almost like I've got an attitude I don't want. It's kind of like my mom toward diabetes. I don't want to believe that. Well, here's all the evidence. I'm not going to believe that, regardless of it. And the Greek doesn't hold that, but the English does. You can be an unbeliever or a disbeliever. And these people were disbelievers. They saw all the evidence, and they were just completely annoyed with him that he wasn't what they were looking for.
Your eyes are not an organ meant for digesting
Yes.
evidence, weighing evidence.
Yeah.
That's your heart
Yeah.
that does that, your understanding.
Yes.
And so anytime Jesus uses sight for understanding, we understand that.
He's reasoning.
Yeah, and he's not
Yes.
talking about blind people versus people who
No.
are sighted.
No.
It would be more difficult to learn something if you couldn't see and hear, like Helen Keller.
Yes.
You'd
Yes.
have to have some. You have to have some input of the truth for
Right.
it to have some work in your life.
Exactly.
If you look at the words and read them,
Yes.
you might say, "Well, that's blather. I don't understand that,"
Yeah,
and
and
not
pass
give
it
it
on.
any consideration.
Yes.
And you can't be talking about me. That's not me.
Yeah. Yeah. You're exactly right.
So this verse can really describe our own figurative transfiguration, like Christ was transfigured literally. This could describe our own figurative transfiguration.
Maybe so. From the point of view, you're receiving this information, and physically they saw it with their eyes, but there, as Brother Gene said, there had to be a reasoning. And nobody can do these things that Jesus was doing except he would be deity. And so what does that mean? And I think that's where it goes, Josh. And how does it affect your life? Yeah, exactly. All right, let's answer some of these questions that you tell me. I didn't mark it. We got down through, I know we got down to the bottom of page 23, didn't we? Is that where we need to start?
Page 24, number 5.
24, number 5. Thank you, Sister Sandra. 24, number 5. Okay, we go back to that section on, they're asking for another sign. Jesus accused that generation of rejecting the opportunities they had. Name the Old Testament nation and characters who did more with their opportunities than the generation of Jesus did with theirs. What was the one that Jonah went to? Nineveh. And then the queen of the south. 33 through 6 strongly resemble the Sermon on the Mount. We were just talking about that. However, the context is different. Consequently, the emphasis also. Those verses in the Sermon on the Mount emphasize our example as well as our need to be single-minded. In this context, Jesus emphasizes the need to let light shine in one's own heart. Don't obstruct the light. Contextually, Jesus' enemies had been slandering him. They've also demanded a sign from heaven. Essentially, he'd been giving them signs from heaven. It's just like, you've just not given us enough evidence. Did y'all hear that on the news, how some people were denying some of these Israelis being killed when they had video of it?
Oh, yeah. They were blaming the Israelis for the attack.
Exactly. You talk about people whose minds are just corrupted to the core, that they hate a particular country, hate the United States, that they can't see straight. They won't even look at evidence when it's on video. But that's what was happening here. Essentially, they have told Jesus that it's his fault that they haven't believed. Can you believe that? Jesus answers by saying the situation is actually reversed. The light is actually shining, but they are obstructing it. Jesus emphasizes that one needs to be careful about his attitude, make sure it's not critical, cynical, which is what the Waldron said, unbelieving, stubborn. The lamp of the body is the eye, and we must be careful that we are single-minded. Okay. All right, and then keep going. A Pharisee asked Jesus to eat. Oh, we hadn't read that part. Let's go to, this is next section. 37 through 41, and then we have a number of woes that there are 6. If you just find them, there will be 6 woes, 3 to Pharisees, 3 to lawyers, and they're similar to what we found in the Galilean ministry. Let's read 37 through 41. Kirsten, if you don't mind.
While Jesus was speaking, a Pharisee asked him to dine with him, so he went in and reclined at table. The Pharisee was astonished to see that he did not first wash before dinner. And the Lord said to him, "Now you Pharisees cleanse the outside of the cup and of the dish, but inside you're full of greed and wickedness. You fools, did not he who made the outside make the inside also? But give as alms those things that are within, and behold, everything is clean for you."
All right, let's answer 2 or 3 of these questions, and then we'll go on from there. A Pharisee asked Jesus to eat breakfast. By the way, do any of your translations use the word breakfast? Use dine, lunch. There's an interesting word, aristao, which is not the same one for dinner and supper that's often used in the New Testament. It's usually considered like a brunch, a meal that you would have after the morning prayer, around 9 to 10. So somewhere we'd say brunch. It's kind of an interesting word but so it came to mean just eat, just to dine, but it's actually used. The same verb form is used in John 21 when it just was daylight, and you remember Jesus was on the Sea of Galilee on the seacoast, and the apostles were just out fishing a little bit, and Peter swims to him, that situation, and then they eat breakfast with some fish on some charcoal. Well, that was breakfast, and it's the same word here. So it's a morning meal. And don't want to get sidetracked. And he sits down to meet, and the Pharisee is so enamored with the fact that he has not done what? Not bathed in a ceremonial way before he ate. And Jesus answers that. Let's answer a question. We'll get to that. We just answered number 1. The Pharisee was amazed that he had not bathed himself. I mentioned in the note, similar accusations against Jesus were made earlier in Galilee, Matthew 15, and the answers he gives now are similar to what he gave then. Further, some of his rebukes here given will also be given during the last week of his life in Matthew 23. He told the Pharisees, Jesus told him that Pharisees were more interested in keeping what? The outside clean, while inside their souls were full of greed or extortion and wickedness, just tremendous badness. Verse 40 affirms that God created both body and soul in the language of his having made the outside as well as the inside. The point is that just as God made both parts of man, the inner as well as the outer, the spirit as well as the body, then true reverence for God means one will strive to keep both clean, both body and soul. It's interesting, 2 Corinthians 7:1, having therefore these great promises, let us cleanse ourselves from every form of defilement of both body and soul. We want to keep our bodies, well, where's the passage that says, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living sacrifice? Where's that?
Romans 12.
Good. Romans 12, verse 1. And so we're to use are our bodies our own? We can do with our body, I'm going to do with my body whatever I want to do. Is that the way Christians talk? No. Actually, Paul said in 1 Corinthians 6, you are not your own. You were bought with a price. Therefore, glorify God in your bodies. So, both are to be kept. All right. Jesus continues the thought in verse 41. If one gives alms of such things as he has, or benevolence, gives what a true heart of compassion, mercy, and love would prompt a person to do, then indeed all things are clean to you. I think that what Jesus is saying is you need to be, we use the word transparent. You need to be honest, and when somebody sees you, what they see is what you are. And when you give someone, it's from the heart. It's out of compassion. You say, I want to try to help this person. Then he says, when you do that, everything else will take care of itself. When you've got your heart right, then everything else will come in line. Okay, we got about 3 or 4 more minutes.
That verse there is a little hard, Phil.
Which one, Brother Gene?
41.
Give for alms those things which are within. And behold, all things are clean.
Isn't he talking about the food that's in the bowl? You give that, and the container will be clean.
Maybe. I had not considered that, but when he goes back to
The NIV says, but give what is inside, and then in parentheses, the dish, to the poor, and everything will be clean for you.
Yeah, it could be. I hadn't looked at it that way. It could very well be, and the idea would be the same. Just
Giving alms to those things that are within.
yeah, giving
You gotta
benevolence
within the dish or within a person. It would be a decision you'd have to make on what that meant.
Yes, yeah, and whatever it would be, either one or both, and it could be some ambiguity of the language. He intended both, kind of a use of that idea of keeping things clean, ceremonially, and we'll give them something out of the bowl, and then everything else is okay. And from the heart, using both. Good point. All right, in 42 through the end, or at least down to 52, you have the reaction among the scribes and Pharisees in 53 and 4. But in 42 through 52, you have 2 paragraphs. And he gives these woes. And always remember, guys, WOE doesn't mean slow down the horse. But what? Beware, alas, oh, this is terrible, a judgment is coming on you. That's the woe to you. Let's read it together. And there are 3 woes in 42, 1 in 42, 1 in 43, 1 in 44. Woe to you, Pharisees, you tithe mint and rue and every herb and pass over justice, the love of God, but these ought you to have done and not to leave the other undone. Have we read that in Matthew? Yes, Matthew 23. Second woe, verse 43. Woe to you, Pharisees, you love the chief seats in the synagogues, the salutations in the marketplace. Jesus would add in Matthew 23, to be called rabbi. That's like people say, well, I've got a title, reverend or pastor or doctor, versus just all your brethren. And then verse 44, woe unto you, for ye are as the tombs which appear not, and the men that walk over them know it not. All right, now in other passages, Jesus would say, you're like whitewashed sepulchres. And the reason they were whitewashed, or painted, we would say, is in order to make them, stand out. Because under the law, if you came up to a tomb and you didn't know it, and you were touching or moving some brush, it would make you what? It would make you ceremonially unclean. And you would have to go about and do that. And so so Jesus in Matthew 23, he said, you're like these whitewashed tombs. Outwardly you appear beautiful, but inwardly you're full of corruption and dead men's bones. All right, that's their character. In this passage, it's similar language, but it's a different emphasis. And the emphasis here is they're not whitewashed. In fact, they're not whitewashed at all. And they're where you cannot actually see them. That's what he said in verse 44. You're as the tombs which appear not. You can't tell that they're tombs or graves. And the men that walk over them know it not. You are like that in the sense that you do not identify yourself for what you are. And as a result of that, the people who are listening to you teach and all that, they really don't know you for who you really are. Does that make sense? I think that's the emphasis here. And let's keep going. So, woe unto you Pharisees. You've got three things here. And then the lawyers would just been people kind of like the scribes. They studied the law and expounded on it. And there are three woes here. One of the lawyers answering said, Teacher, in saying this you reproachest us also. And he said, Woe unto you lawyers also, for ye load men with burdens grievous to be borne, and ye yourselves touch not the burden with one of your fingers. That is, your preaching doesn't match your what? Your life, yes. Your talk doesn't match your walk, so to speak. Woe unto you, verse 47, for ye build the tombs of the prophets. That is, you decorate them, you keep them up. And your fathers killed them. So ye are witnesses and consent unto the works of your fathers, for they killed them, and ye build their tombs. Therefore also said the wisdom of God, and I think that's kind of a summary of several Old Testament passages, I will send unto them the prophets and apostles, and some of them they shall kill and persecute, that the blood of the prophets which was shed from the foundation of the world may be required of this generation, from the blood of Abel to the blood of Zachariah, who perished between the altar and the sanctuary. Yea, I say unto you, it shall be required of this generation. In other words, you are no different than your fathers, your ancestors, who were responsible for killing the very what? The very prophets. And you claim that you're decorating, you're keeping up their tombs and all that, and you're showing respect. No, you're just like your fathers who killed these prophets. Couldn't stand what they had to say. Well, as a result of that, what happens in 53 and 4? When he was come out from thence, the scribes and Pharisees began to press upon him vehemently, and to provoke him to speak of many things, doing what? Yes, trying to lay wait for him, to catch something that he might say. All right. Because of time, we're going to have to stop, but let's plan to just kind of run through our questions, and then we'll go on into 12 Sunday morning, Lord willing. Any comments you want to make, though, on these passages here? The woes. You can categorize some of these in various areas of life that these Pharisees, the lawyers, the scribes. All right. Anybody?